I still remember the exact moment my 9-year career started crumbling. My boss looked me dead in the eye and said, "We'll discuss your raise next quarter," for the sixth time. What he didn't know was that I'd already made a decision that would cost him everything. After 9 years of building this company, training his best employees, and delivering results that spoke for themselves, I was about to show him exactly what happens when you ignore the person who built your empire. My name is Kevin Thompson, and for nearly a decade, I'd been the backbone of Miller and Associates. I started as a junior consultant fresh out of college, working 16-hour days and weekends, believing that hard work would speak for itself. And it did speak, just not loud enough for the people writing the paychecks. I'd built something special at that company. Over 5 years, I'd increased our revenue by 340%. Not 34%, 340%. I had the spreadsheets, the client testimonials, and the bank statements to prove it. Every major deal we closed had my fingerprints on it. Every satisfied client had my personal phone number. I wasn't just an employee. I was the foundation the entire operation stood on. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent more time training my replacements than anyone had spent training me. Sarah Martinez started as my assistant 3 years ago. I taught her everything: client management, proposal writing, negotiation tactics. Last month, she got promoted to senior account manager with a salary that was 25% higher than mine. Then there was Mike Chen, a bright kid I'd mentored from day one. I'd watched him grow from someone who couldn't format a PowerPoint to leading his own team. Both of them now made more money than the person who'd taught them everything they knew. But the real kicker was my relationship with our two biggest clients. Martinez Industries, no relation to Sarah, and Blackstone Corporation weren't just accounts to me. I'd built personal relationships with their CEOs over years of late-night calls, emergency meetings, and results that exceeded their wildest expectations. When Ricardo Martinez, the CEO, called our office, he didn't ask for Miller and Associates. He asked for Kevin Thompson. Same with Helen Blackstone. These weren't just business relationships. They were partnerships built on trust, competence, and consistent delivery. The drive home that Tuesday evening felt longer than usual. Jennifer was waiting with dinner. Again. Emma, our 8-year-old, had already eaten and was working on homework at the kitchen table. This had become our routine, me arriving home to reheated meals and a wife who'd learned to eat alone. "Long day?" Jennifer asked, though we both knew the answer. "Martinez Industries closed the Peterson deal," I said, loosening my tie. $2.8 million. Emma looked up from her math homework. "Is that good, Daddy?" "Very good, sweetheart." I ruffled her hair. "That's enough to send you to any college you want." Jennifer smiled, but I caught the worry in her eyes. We both knew that while I was generating millions for the company, our own savings account told a different story. Emma's college fund was growing, but slowly. Too slowly for parents watching their daughter get older every day. "Mrs. Patterson's dad took her to Disney World last week," Emma said casually, not looking up from her worksheet. "She said they stayed in a castle." The words hit harder than they should have. I was pulling in massive deals. My clients trusted me with their most important projects, but I couldn't afford to take my daughter to Disney World without seriously impacting our finances. Something was fundamentally wrong with that picture. That night, after Emma was asleep, I did something I'd been avoiding for months, I researched salary data for senior consultants in our market. What I found made my stomach drop. According to every major salary aggregator, someone with my experience and track record should be making $40,000 more than my current salary. $40,000. That was Emma's entire college fund contribution for 2 years. I'd discovered this discrepancy 6 months ago, which is when I first approached my boss, John Miller, about a salary review. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation, my achievements, market rates, client retention statistics, revenue generation numbers, everything a rational business owner would need to make an obvious decision. "Kevin, you know we value you," Miller had said, barely glancing at my carefully prepared documents. "Let me review our budget, and we'll revisit this next quarter." Next quarter. Those 2 words would haunt me for the next 6 months. Have you ever felt invisible despite being indispensable? That's exactly where I found myself as month 2 rolled around. I scheduled another meeting with Miller, this time bringing even more detailed reports. I documented every client interaction, every successful project, every instance where my personal intervention had saved a deal. "John, I think we need to discuss my compensation," I said, sliding the folder across his mahogany desk. "I've put together some data that I think you'll find interesting." Miller glanced at the folder without opening it. "Kevin, the company's going through some restructuring right now. Let's wait until things settle down a bit." Restructuring. Funny how companies always seem to be restructuring when employees ask for fair compensation, but never when they needed to spend money on new office furniture or executive bonuses. At home, the financial pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. Jennifer's mother had been diagnosed with diabetes, and the medical bills were piling up. We had good insurance, but the deductibles and copays were eating into our savings faster than I could replenish them. "We're falling behind, Kevin," Jennifer said one evening as we reviewed our monthly budget. "Mom's medications alone are $400 a month." I stared at the numbers on our laptop screen. $400 was pocket change for the company. They'd spent twice that on lunch for a client meeting last week. But for us, it meant choosing between Emma's dance classes and Jennifer's mother's health. The cruel irony was that I was busier than ever. Sarah, the assistant I'd trained, had been promoted to senior account manager. Mike, my former mentee, was now managing his own team. Both of them were earning more than me, and both of them regularly came to me for advice on how to handle their new responsibilities. "Kevin, can you walk me through the Hendricks proposal strategy?" Sarah asked during one of our weekly check-ins. "I want to make sure I'm positioning everything correctly." I spent an hour teaching her the same techniques I'd developed over years of trial and error. Techniques that had generated millions in revenue. Techniques that, apparently, weren't valuable enough to compensate me fairly for developing them. The breaking point came in month 3. Martinez Industries' CEO called me directly, not the company line, but my personal cell phone. "Kevin, I need to tell you something," Ricardo Martinez said. "The Peterson deal isn't just about the money, it's about trust. When my board asked me why we keep working with Miller and Associates, despite higher bids from competitors, I told them the truth. We're not working with Miller and Associates. We're working with Kevin Thompson." That conversation should have been career-defining. A major client explicitly stating that their loyalty was to me personally, not the company. Instead, when I shared this feedback with Miller during our 3rd salary discussion, His response was predictable. Your loyalty is appreciated, Kevin, but we need to be careful with budgets right now. Careful with budgets. This from a man who just approved a $20,000 renovation of the executive bathroom. Month 4 brought a revelation that made everything crystal clear. While reviewing industry publications in the lobby before a client meeting, I spotted a job posting. Senior Business Development Consultant. Same responsibilities as my role. Same experience requirements. The salary range, 60% higher than what I was currently making. I took a photo of the posting and spent my lunch break researching the company. They were smaller than Miller and Associates, with less prestigious clients and lower overall revenue. Yet they valued the same skill set enough to pay significantly more for it. That evening, I sat in my car in our driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. Emma was visible through the kitchen window, helping Jennifer set the table. My family, the people I was working myself to death to provide for, while being systematically undervalued by the people benefiting most from my efforts. I called Jennifer from the car. "Hey, are you coming in?" she answered. "In a minute. I think I'm done." Done with what? Done accepting less than I'm worth. When does loyalty become self-betrayal? I'd been asking myself that question for months, but that night, I finally had an answer. Loyalty becomes self-betrayal the moment you realize the other party doesn't share your definition of the relationship. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I called Ricardo Martinez directly. "Ricardo, it's Kevin Thompson. Do you have a few minutes to chat about something outside of our current projects?" The conversation that followed would change everything. But before I share what Ricardo told me, you need to understand what happened in month 5. The moment I realized just how expendable Miller thought I was. Miller had hired a new junior consultant, fresh out of college with 0 experience. During the onboarding process, I accidentally saw his offer letter. This kid, who couldn't tell a P&L statement from a grocery list, was being paid $15,000 more than I'd been making when I started 9 years ago. Adjusted for inflation and experience, he was starting at nearly my current salary level. I spent that entire weekend documenting everything. Every client relationship, every process I'd developed, every system I'd created. Not for training purposes, for protection purposes, because I'd finally realized something that should have been obvious years earlier. If you're not documenting your value, someone else will define it for you. Monday morning, I scheduled what I knew would be my final salary discussion with Miller. "John, I need 5 minutes of your time," I said, walking into his office with a folder I'd titled Professional Development Discussion. "Kevin, if this is about the compensation thing again, it's about the market value of someone who's generated $12 million in revenue over the past 3 years while training your next generation of leaders." Miller leaned back in his chair, finally giving me his full attention. "Here's what I've discovered," I continued, opening the folder. "Similar positions in our market are paying $40,000 to $50,000 more than my current salary. The 2 junior consultants I trained are now earning more than me. Our biggest clients have explicitly stated their loyalty is to me personally, not the company. And last week, you hired someone with 0 experience at a starting salary that's 85% of what I'm currently making after 9 years. I slid the documentation across his desk. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for market rate compensation for market rate performance. Miller glanced through the papers, his expression unreadable. When he finally looked up, his response encapsulated everything wrong with the relationship. "Kevin, you're comfortable here. Why rock the boat?" Comfortable. As if accepting systematic undervaluation was comfort rather than complacency. "You're absolutely right," I said, standing up. "I am comfortable. That ends today." The change in Miller's expression was immediate. "Let's not be hasty here. We can revisit this in Q3. You already had 6 months to revisit this. I'm done revisiting. Kevin, be reasonable. You know how valuable you are to this organization. If you knew how valuable I was, we wouldn't be having this conversation for the 7th time." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "I'll have my resignation letter on your desk Monday morning. You'll want to start thinking about how you're going to explain to Martinez Industries and Blackstone Corporation why their primary contact is no longer with the company." That weekend, while Miller was probably enjoying his golf game, I was having conversations that would reshape everything. Not just for me, but for the company that had taken my loyalty for granted. Sunday evening, I sent my resignation email. Professional, courteous, with 2 weeks' notice. No drama, no accusations, just a simple statement. Effective in 14 days, Kevin Thompson would no longer be employed by Miller and Associates. But I'd also made 2 phone calls that weekend, calls that would teach Miller exactly what happens when you ignore the person who built your empire. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. But sometimes walking away is just the beginning. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that only comes after making a life-changing decision. My resignation email had been sent 12 hours earlier, and I knew Miller would be walking into the office to find his world fundamentally altered. I dressed carefully that morning, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted to feel professional and composed for what I knew would be a very interesting day. My phone started ringing at 7:47 a.m. "Kevin, we need to talk. Now." Miller's voice had a panic I'd never heard before. "Good morning, John. I'll be in the office at my regular time. We can discuss transition logistics then." Transition logistics? "Kevin, let's be rational here. I think we can work something out. You had 6 months to work something out. I'm happy to complete my transition responsibilities professionally." The emergency meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:30, made my usual coffee, and reviewed my transition documents. I'd spent the weekend creating detailed handover notes for every active project, every client relationship, every process I'd developed. If Miller and Associates was going to survive my departure, they'd need this information. Despite everything, I wasn't going to sabotage the company. I was simply going to let them discover my true value the hard way. "Kevin, sit down," Miller said when I entered his office. Sarah and Mike were already there, looking confused and concerned. "Let's talk about this rationally. What would it take to keep you here?" "You want honesty, John? It would take a time machine. 6 months ago, a 15% raise and some recognition would have solved this. 3 months ago, maybe 25% and a promotion. Today, you'd need to offer me partnership to even get a conversation." Miller's face went pale. "Partnership that's something we could explore." "That offer would have meant something 6 months ago," I replied calmly. "Today, it just confirms that you only value what you're about to lose." I spent the rest of that first week maintaining absolute professionalism. I completed my transition documentation, handed over project files, and even scheduled meetings to introduce Sarah and Mike to key client contacts. But there was one thing I couldn't transfer: the personal relationships I'd built over 9 years. Wednesday afternoon, my personal phone rang during lunch. "Kevin, it's Ricardo Martinez. I heard some concerning news." "What kind of news, Ricardo?" "That you're leaving Miller and Associates. Please tell me that's not true." "I'm afraid it is true. My last day is next Friday." There was a long pause. "Kevin, I need to be direct with you. Our business relationship has never been with Miller and Associates. It's been with you. When my board asks me why we continue to work with your firm despite receiving lower bids from competitors, I tell them the truth. We're not working with a firm. We're working with Kevin Thompson." "I appreciate that, Ricardo. It means more than you know." "Are you going to another firm?" "I'm exploring my options." "Well, when you figure out where you're landing, call me immediately. Because wherever Kevin Thompson goes, Martinez Industries goes too." Thursday brought a similar call from Helen Blackstone. "Kevin, what's this I hear about you leaving? Please tell me John Miller hasn't lost his mind completely." "I've submitted my resignation, Helen. 2 weeks' notice." "Overcompensation?" "Over respect." Helen laughed, but not with humor. "Kevin, I'm going to tell you something in confidence. For the past year, my board has been questioning why we pay Miller and Associates premium rates. The only reason I've been able to justify it is by pointing to the results you personally deliver. Without you, they're just another consulting firm charging premium prices." "I understand, Helen. Do you? Because I don't think you do. Miller and Associates is about to lose the Blackstone account, not because we're unhappy with the work, but because the work was only exceptional because of one person: you." That evening, I sat in my car in the company parking lot, processing what had just happened. 2 major clients had essentially told me that their loyalty was personal, not corporate. I'd suspected this, but hearing it confirmed was both validating and terrifying. Validating because it proved my worth. Terrifying because I was beginning to understand the true scope of what Miller was about to lose. I called Jennifer from the car. "How was your day?" she asked. "Educational. Very educational." "Good educational or bad educational?" "Life-changing educational." My final week passed in a blur of handover meetings and increasingly desperate attempts by Miller to retain me. By Thursday, he was offering a 30% raise and a promotion to senior partner. By Friday, he was discussing equity stakes and profit sharing. Each offer came exactly 6 months and 1 week too late. My last day ended with a brief conversation in Miller's office. "Kevin, I want you to know that you're making a mistake. This company made you who you are." "No, John, I made this company what it is. You're about to find out the difference." I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to Sarah and Mike, and walked out of Miller and Associates for the last time. I felt lighter than I had in years. The first domino fell exactly 1 week later. Martinez Industries formally terminated their contract with Miller and Associates, citing strategic realignment of consulting partnerships. The termination letter, which Sarah shared with me in confidence, was professionally worded but devastating in its implications. They were ending a relationship worth $1.2 million annually, effective immediately. Ricardo had called Miller directly to deliver the news. "I want to be clear about this, John," Ricardo had said, according to Sarah's account. This isn't about money, and it's not about service quality. This is about personnel. Our business relationship was built on trust and personal accountability. When Kevin Thompson left your organization, that relationship ended too. Blackstone Corporation followed 3 days later. Their termination was even more direct. Helen Blackstone didn't bother with diplomatic language. Miller and Associates has lost the individual who made our partnership valuable, her letter stated. Without Kevin Thompson's direct involvement, we see no reason to continue paying premium rates for standard consulting services. 2 terminations, $2, $8 million in annual revenue, gone in 10 days. But the real damage was just beginning. I was sitting in Disney World with Emma and Jennifer when Sarah called me. We'd finally taken that trip I'd been promising for years, and watching Emma meet Mickey Mouse was worth every penny of the premium we'd paid for last-minute reservations. "Kevin, I need to tell you what's happening here," Sarah said. "It's complete chaos." "What do you mean?" 3 more clients have called for meetings. They're all asking the same question. If Miller and Associates was so dependent on one person, what other risks are we taking by working with you? I pulled Jennifer aside while Emma was getting her picture taken with Cinderella. "Miller and Associates is imploding," I told her quietly. "Because you left?" "Because they built their entire reputation on my relationships and never bothered to have a backup plan." Jennifer squeezed my hand. "Are you okay with that?" I watched Emma laughing as Goofy signed her autograph book. I'm okay with finally being valued for what I actually contributed. By the time we returned from Disney, the situation had deteriorated beyond anything I'd imagined. Mike called me with updates that read like a corporate disaster manual. The company had lost 5 major clients in 3 weeks. Not just my direct relationships. Other clients were questioning the stability and competence of a firm that could lose 2 flagship accounts so quickly. Industry publications were covering the major client departures as a case study in account management failure. The financial impact was catastrophic. Miller and Associates had gone from profitable to struggling virtually overnight. The company's stock price, they'd gone public 2 years earlier, dropped 30% in a month as investors learned the scope of the client losses. "Kevin," Mike said during one of our calls, "they've had to lay off 15 people. 15. John's talking about selling the company." Miller himself had called me 6 times in 2 weeks. I'd listened to each voicemail, but hadn't returned the calls. The desperation in his voice was evident and escalating. "Kevin, please call me back. I know we got off on the wrong foot, but we need to figure out how to fix this situation. Kevin, I'm willing to discuss partnership terms that would give you significant equity in the company. Kevin, the board is asking me to reach out about bringing you back as managing partner." The final voicemail was different in tone. "Kevin, I need to know if you're planning to go after our remaining clients. I have a responsibility to our employees to understand what we're dealing with." I finally called him back. "John, it's Kevin." "Thank God." "Kevin, we need to talk. Can you come in?" "I don't think that's necessary. You asked if I'm planning to go after your remaining clients. The answer is no. I didn't go after the clients who left. They made their own decisions based on where they felt their business was best served. But you're working with them now?" "I'm working with companies that value my contributions appropriately." There was a long pause. "Kevin, what would it take to fix this?" You can't fix this, John. This isn't a problem you can solve with a counteroffer or a title change. This is the natural consequence of systematically undervaluing someone for years. The board is willing to offer you full partnership, equity, profit sharing, your name on the letterhead. John, do you know what the saddest part of this conversation is? 6 months ago, a simple raise and some basic respect would have prevented all of this. Now, you're offering me partnership in a company that's worth 30% less than it was a month ago. I hung up and turned to Jennifer. I think it's time to make some decisions about our future. The offers had been pouring in for weeks. 3 major consulting firms had reached out directly, 2 through headhunters, 1 through a client referral. But the most interesting opportunity had come from an unexpected source, Caldwell and Associates, the industry leader I'd been competing against for years. Margaret Caldwell herself had called. Kevin, I've been watching this situation with great interest. I think we should talk. The conversation with Margaret changed everything. Caldwell and Associates wasn't just offering me a job. They were offering me the chance to build something new. A specialized division focused on the kind of long-term client relationships I'd mastered, with a starting salary that was 80% higher than what I'd been requesting from Miller, plus equity in the new division. Kevin, I'm going to be direct, Margaret had said. Your former employer made a catastrophic error in judgment. Their loss is my gain. I'm offering you the chance to do what you do best, with the support and compensation you should have had years ago. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. The day I signed with Caldwell and Associates, I received a call from the editor of Industry Consulting magazine. Mr. Thompson, we're doing a feature on the Miller and Associates situation. We'd like to interview you about client relationship management and employee retention. The article that followed became one of the most read pieces in the magazine's history. It wasn't a hit piece on Miller. I'd been careful to keep my comments professional and constructive. But it was a case study in the cost of undervaluing key personnel. The lesson here isn't about revenge, I was quoted as saying. It's about recognizing that people create value, not companies. When you systematically undervalue the people creating your success, you're essentially building your business on a foundation you don't control. 6 months after my departure from Miller and Associates, the transformation was complete. I was leading a new division at Caldwell and Associates, working with Martinez Industries, Blackstone Corporation, and 3 new clients who'd followed me specifically because of my reputation for results. Sarah and Mike had both joined my team. Miller had been forced to let them go during the downsizing, and Margaret Caldwell had been happy to hire proven talent. Kevin, Sarah said during one of our team meetings, I need to tell you something. When you left Miller and Associates, I thought you were being too proud. I didn't understand why you wouldn't just take the counter offer. And now, I understand the difference between being valued and being needed. Miller needed you, but he never valued you. There's a huge difference. The Industry Consulting Awards that year included a new category, Client Relationship Excellence. The first recipient was Kevin Thompson of Caldwell and Associates for demonstrating that business relationships are built on trust, competence, and mutual respect. Emma, now 9, was in the audience when I accepted the award. Ladies and gentlemen, I said from the podium, success isn't about being irreplaceable. It's about being irreplaceable to people who understand your value. The moment you accept being undervalued, You're teaching people how to treat you. After the ceremony, Miller approached me in the hotel lobby. He looked older, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Kevin, congratulations. You deserved this." "Thank you, John. I owe you an apology. I should have recognized your value when it mattered." I looked at this man who'd controlled my professional fate for 9 years, who'd dismissed my worth repeatedly, who'd learned the hard way that talent isn't owned. It's earned through respect and appropriate compensation. "John, I appreciate that, but the apology I needed was 6 months of fair compensation and recognition. This apology is for your conscience, not my benefit." He nodded, understanding. "For what it's worth, you were right about everything." The worst part, John, is that none of this had to happen. A 15% raise 18 months ago would have prevented all of this. But you chose to test my loyalty instead of rewarding it. Miller and Associates was acquired 3 months later by a larger firm at a significant discount. Miller himself was retained as a regional manager, a demotion disguised as integration. The company I'd helped build for 9 years essentially ceased to exist. But the real transformation wasn't in what happened to Miller and Associates. It was in what I'd learned about my own worth and the importance of demanding appropriate recognition. Emma, now in 4th grade, was working on a school project about heroes. "Dad, can I interview you for my project?" "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to know?" Mrs. Johnson said heroes are people who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Is that what you did when you left your old job? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "Emma, I learned something important that year. Your worth isn't determined by one person's ability to see it. If someone consistently treats you as less valuable than you are, the heroic thing isn't to accept it. The heroic thing is to find people who recognize your true value." "So you found people who appreciated you?" "I found people who appreciated my work, paid me fairly for it, and treated me with respect. And because of that, I could be home for dinner every night, take you to Disney World, and help Grandma with her medical bills." Emma nodded seriously. "So standing up for yourself helped our whole family." "That's exactly right." 2 years later, I received an unexpected invitation. The Harvard Business School wanted me to speak to their graduate program about employee retention and client relationship management. The case study they developed around the Miller and Associates situation had become part of their curriculum. Standing in that lecture hall, looking at the next generation of business leaders, I shared the lesson that had cost one company millions and changed my family's life forever. Know your worth, document your value, and never accept less than fair compensation for exceptional work. Because the moment you teach people that your value is negotiable, you've told them everything they need to know about how to treat you. After my presentation, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Thompson, do you ever regret leaving Miller and Associates? I mean, you essentially destroyed a company you'd helped build." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "I simply stopped accepting responsibility for their success without receiving credit for my contributions." They built their business model on systematic undervaluation. That was their choice, not mine. But don't you feel guilty about the employees who lost their jobs? I thought about Sarah and Mike, both now thriving in their new roles. About the 15 employees who'd been laid off when the company contracted. About Miller himself, diminished and struggling in his new position. I feel sorry for everyone who was hurt by poor leadership decisions, but I don't feel guilty for refusing to subsidize those decisions with my own undervaluation. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let people experience the full consequences of their choices. Ritz. That evening, I called Jennifer from my hotel room. "How did the speech go?" she asked. "I think I helped some future business leaders understand the real cost of not valuing their people." "And how do you feel about everything now?" "Really?" I looked out at the Boston skyline, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. Emma was thriving in her new school. Jennifer had been able to return to work part-time, and we'd fully funded Emma's college account 2 years ahead of schedule. I feel grateful that I finally learned to value myself appropriately, grateful that walking away led to something better, and grateful that our daughter will grow up understanding that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you command through competence and self-worth. The next morning, as I was checking out of the hotel, the desk clerk handed me a message that had been delivered overnight. "Mr. Thompson, this is Margaret Caldwell. The board has approved your proposal for the new Client Excellence Institute. Congratulations, Director Thompson. You've just been given a budget to teach other companies how to avoid becoming the next Miller and Associates." I smiled, thinking about Emma's school project 2 years earlier. Heroes, she'd learned, are people who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Sometimes, walking away is the strongest thing you can do. But sometimes, walking away is just the beginning of building something better. Your worth isn't determined by one person's inability to see it. Never forget that.